This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
President Xi Jinping says China will enhance its international cooperation in the fight against COVID-19. We update you on developments in Guinea as it navigates through a transition period. And Ethiopia's military appeals to those fighting for the Tigray People's Liberation Front to surrender. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Also coming up, we look at efforts to manage increasing teen pregnancies in South Africa. And in sports, Egypt and Zimbabwe make coaching changes ahead of next month's 2022 World Cup qualifiers. Welcome to the program. We begin the top of the hour with Chinese President Xi Jinping, who says China will strengthen cooperation with other developing countries in fighting against COVID-19. She addressed the meeting of Shanghai Cooperation Organization via video link. He said China will continue its efforts to provide vaccines to the world. President Xi also said the group should take tough actions against terrorism and improve security operation mechanisms. When speaking about Afghanistan, the Chinese president says the SCO could play a positive role in facilitating peace in the country.
Afghanistan has undergone drastic changes. The withdrawal of foreign troops has opened a new page in its history, but Afghanistan still faces many daunting challenges, and it needs the support and assistance of the international community, particularly countries in our region. We SCO member states need to step up coordination, make full use of platforms such as the SCO Afghanistan Contact Group, and facilitate a smooth transition in Afghanistan.
Well, President Xi says the SCO should continue to improve trade and investments among member states. He also proposes to create growth drivers for groups cooperation, such as digital economy, green energy, and modern agriculture. President Xi says China will continue to share its market opportunities to help economic recovery. The SCO meeting is taking place in the Tajik capital of Dushanbe. The grouping includes China, Russia, 4 Central Asian nations, India, and Pakistan. Well, for more on this story, we're now joined by Malte Brosig. He is a professor in international relations at the University of the Witwatersrand Department of International Relations. Professor, thank you for joining us. Afghanistan has featured heavily in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Forum. What role should regional neighbors then play in helping Afghanistan to stabilize?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. Yeah, I mean, the Afghan issue, of course, is one of the most pressing ones in the region right now. And I think the greatest, the chance for influencing somehow events on the ground are the greatest if regional organizations like the SCO is providing the Taliban with a coherent response and a clear message. And I think one of the common ground is certainly that Afghanistan, and it's not acceptable for the region that Afghanistan is either exporting or harboring terrorist activities and groups in any kind of way. So I think there's quite a lot of agreement on that, as well as maybe also preventing Afghanistan from becoming a place for proxy wars. We've seen that in Syria happening, and the situation is still very fragile on the ground. So it's a very early phase, of course, the Taliban trying to consolidate power here. And of course, the most pressing issue also is for the Afghan population is the access for humanitarian aid, which has to go through regional neighbors in the direct neighborhood of Afghanistan, and then we'll wait. We still have to wait and see to which extent more cooperation with Afghanistan is actually possible. I mean, the country wants to join the SCO, of course, I mean, I don't think there's a rush for admitting it. So this also provides some leeway here in influencing the government, maybe somehow.
And Professor, as we heard earlier, the Chinese president is calling for more cooperation in combating terrorism. What needs to be done then to eliminate risks posed by global extremists in places like Africa?
That is a tremendously big question, actually, and it's an important one because we see, especially on the African continent, that certain terrorist activities, although there was a military response organized from the continent in cooperation with many international partners here, these initiatives are not proceeding, not succeeding, actually. So the first thing, is to address the issue, which should be welcomed, and then we have to critically think how we wanna proceed. So the current situation where we're focusing a lot on the military response, so I think that is somehow finding its own limitations. So it has to be better linked with governance questions, because there's no point in militarily pushing back militants, which is necessary very often. But then the question is, who is filling in the gap? And this has to be done then by local governance structures. Most African countries are transforming, but they're also fragile, and this makes them vulnerable somehow. And then we have to be honest that creating governance is a tremendously difficult task, and this can not necessarily be initiated from the outside. That must really grow up from the ground, and this is a very long-term process where we also have to expect some setbacks. Other issues. The list is very long, so don't want to talk for forever here. But the other issue is that the United Nations struggles with two comprehensive mandates. So, and I think the Secretary General mentioned that a couple of times. So we have to think about what priorities we want to set in peacekeeping operations, which are also asked to engage with militants here. And I will leave it there. So it's a very complicated question, and I think we constantly have to review and discuss this actually. And different conflicts, of course, require different responses.
Right. And finally, briefly, Professor, what lessons then can African countries draw from having a vibrant body like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization?
This is, I think there is space for, let's say, intercontinental learning here, but of course, Africa already has a number of regional organizations, right? And maybe one thing is that maybe there are too many, and maybe there's space for consolidation. So sometimes it's better to have maybe fewer regional organizations, but they are more effective, and then having more political support and better resources, actually. I think that might be one issue.
All right, Professor, thank you very much for your insights there. Professor Malte Brosig with the Department of International Relations at Wits University, joining us live there from South Africa. Moving on, the Chinese foreign minister has discussed Afghanistan with diplomats from Russia, Pakistan and Iran. Wang Yi said these three countries are important regional powers and called for joint efforts to help ensure stability in Afghanistan. Wang also urged the U.S. to take responsibility and provide humanitarian aid. He proposed to respect Afghan sovereignty and support the Taliban in forming an inclusive government. Wang also hoped the Taliban can contribute to regional security and crack down on terrorism. China said it's ready to provide aid and COVID vaccines. Wang also proposed to help Afghanistan achieve sustainable development and take part in regional cooperation. Alyosha Milenkovic has more.
The word that dominated the SCO-related meetings here in Dushanbe is Afghanistan. The present and the future of that country topped the agenda of all official discussions on Thursday. Even the meeting between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and his Russian, Iranian and Pakistani counterparts opened with remarks on the future of Afghanistan. After 40 years of turmoil and instability in that country, its neighbors and the countries in Europe and Asia would like to see it attain stability and prosperity. SCO members think this is the only way to prevent the country from becoming a breeding ground for countless extremist groups that might export their ideology abroad. Before the main leaders' meeting scheduled on Friday, delegations from member countries hope to iron out a joint strategy to help Afghanistan stand on its own feet. Something that everybody here thinks cannot be done without China's support. Alyosha Milenkovic, CGTN, Dushanbe.
Now, Afghanistan had enjoyed observer status at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization before the Taliban returned to power. The new interim government is not attending the Dushanbe summit. The conference comes 1 month after the Taliban seized Kabul. Zmarialai Abbasin has more.
Taliban are so much busy. They have very much homework to do for the international recognition, to gain the trust from the regional countries, particularly the major players of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That's why the Taliban will be under examination of the region and also the world for a long time now, since they get the recognition from the region and international community. On the other hand, the fractions among the Taliban are also concerned, and there were a lot of rumors that there were clashes inside the presidential palace of Afghanistan between the Haqqanis and the team of Mullah Abdul Ghani brother, the co-founder of the Taliban. But both of the sides, from Haqqani sides, Anas Haqqani, member of Haqqani family, rejected the claims and said there is no problem and there will never be any problem between the Taliban, and there is no fractions according to Anas Haqqani, and they're united. On the other hand, Mullah Abdul Ghani brother was disappeared off the sights of people, and finally there were also rumors that he was even shot, killed. But then he came up with an audio message and rejected all these claims and said they are very much kind to each other. So all these claims are again rejected by the Taliban, but this is a fear. What if the Taliban fractions start sagas among the Taliban and the intra-Taliban clashes happen? So then what would be the future of Afghanistan? That's what the Taliban reject, but yet major questions in the public mind in Afghanistan and also for the world. Zmarialai Abbasin, CGTN, Kabul.
Turning to the African continent now, where leaders of the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, have imposed stiffer sanctions on the military junta that ousted Guinea's President Alpha Condé. It includes the freezing of their financial assets and those of their families as well. ECOWAS also threatened to apply the same sanctions on Mali's military junta if the country fails to hold elections early next year. The West African Regional Bloc hopes these sanctions can compel the junta leaders in Guinea and Mali to return the country to civilian rule. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports now from Accra.
This emergency summit became necessary after the military special forces in Guinea ousted President Alpha Condé, accusing him of corruption and mismanagement of the economy. The West African leaders have condemned the coup and demanded the immediate release of Condé, who's been detained by the military junta.
They imposed sanctions on the member of the National Committee for Development and Restoration in Guinea, the new organ that has taken over. The sanctions cover travel bans, freeze of assets, financial assets.
ECOWAS has called on more of the international community, including the African Union and European Union, to support the implementation of the sanctions. The West African leaders said they were also concerned over the slow pace of transition to civilian rule in Mali. They have threatened to impose sanctions, including the freezing of financial assets and travel bans on the people delaying the transition. Mali and Guinea were not present at this ECOWAS meeting. Both countries are still suspended from participating in any activity of the regional bloc. The West African leaders want Guinea to hold elections within the next 6 months and restore the country to constitutional rule. They have also urged Mali to present a roadmap for elections by October and conduct the polls in February next year, according to the transition plan. ECOWAS chairman is expected to visit Guinea and Mali to brief the military junta leaders on the decisions taken by the West African leaders. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Right, well, let's delve further into this story. For more on this, we're joined by Desiree Cannon in Conakry. Desiree, You've heard reports on the ground then that ECOWAS is sending yet another delegation to Guinea. What is the latest on this, and what should we expect then going forward?
As you can see, we are currently at Guinea International Airport waiting for the arrival of the second delegation of ECOWAS. But it should be noted that ECOWAS sent the first delegation last Friday when to meet with the coup leaders. So during the talks, ECOWAS key priorities were at two levels. The first was the release of President Alpha Conde, and the second one was how to put in place a peaceful and short transition. So today, ECOWAS is coming to Guinea-Conakry certainly to implement what they discussed with the junta last week. I mean, the release of President Alpha Conde, and also the implementation of a 6-month peaceful transition.
And Desiree, the West African regional bloc, as we've heard, has imposed sanctions. Has there been any reaction from the military junta in Guinea, and how is this move then likely to affect transition and negotiations there?
Well, yesterday during Accra's talks, ECOWAS put some sanctions, imposed some sanctions on the coup leaders. Here in Conakry, the coup leaders have not replied ECOWAS sanctions. They are busy with the consultation that began last Tuesday. They are meeting with the different stakeholders of the country, the diplomats, the company, the mining companies, the civil society, and many other people. So to sum up, the junta has not yet responded. The sanctions of ECOWAS, maybe today when ECOWAS comes, they will have to discuss this issue again to know the release of President Alpha Conde and also the implementation of 6-month transition. It is important to know that ECOWAS wanted previously ECOWAS to give them time, almost 18 months to lead the transition before coming to the presidential election.
All right, Desiree, thank you very much for your insights there. CGTN's Desiree Cannon speaking to us live there from Conakry, Guinea. Well, it's time for us to take a quick break. When we return, Ethiopia's military appeals to those fighting for the Tigray People's Liberation Front to surrender. And we look at efforts to manage increasing teen pregnancies in South Africa.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in, tune in, and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Welcome back to news we are tracking from the Horn of Africa region. A Turkish airline flight to Mogadishu is reported to have been forced to stop in Djibouti. It is believed that among passengers on the Turkish airline flight was Somali suspended spy chief Fahad Yassin. Yassin was reportedly en route to Mogadishu to present a report on Ikran Tahlil's death. Tahlil was a cybersecurity expert working for Somalia's National Intelligence and Security Agency, who was abducted by unknown people on June the 26th in Mogadishu. It is being reported that army officers have been spotted in Mogadishu International Airport. Moving on, Ethiopia's military is calling on young people and militias fighting for the Tigray People's Liberation Front to surrender peacefully. The Ethiopian military says those who turn themselves in will be taken care of. The conflict in the country's north between government troops and forces loyal to the TPLF has been raging for months. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
Ethiopian National Defense Forces says the army will accept those who surrender from the Tigray People's Liberation Front, treat them if they are injured, and facilitate a peaceful life with their families. The government says this is a noble call.
I think it's important that this message is received within the spirit of solidarity, that is received within the spirit of understanding that the Tigray region cannot sustain loss of an entire generation of youth, as is being perpetrated by the TPLF as well.
Fighting in the north has ready for talks yet. The government has reiterated that it will not negotiate with terrorists. TPLF, on the other hand, has given conditions that it says the government must meet if it is to have any peace talks. In the meantime, the humanitarian crisis in the region is getting worse. The United Nations World Food Programme says about 7 million people in the region need its support. WFP says it needs about $426 million to expand its emergency food assistance program in Ethiopia over the next 6 months. And the government is calling for help internally.
Apart from the donor fatigue, I mean, Ethiopians are also supporting their fellow brothers and sisters, and this call is actually also something that is being put to Ethiopians throughout the country and also in the diaspora to keep supporting, because this aspect of supporting each other is something that's inherent to our culture and our social fabric, and this is something that we still call upon.
Calls for mediation fronted by the United Nations, African Union and individual countries have not been successful so far. The government says that after a new administration is formed in October, a national dialogue mechanism is expected to lead to peace and reconciliation in the north. Coletta Wanjohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Moving on, Libya's interim Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibah is in Cairo to boost ties with Egypt and discuss his country's political roadmap. Dbeibah will also discuss the return of Egyptian workers to Libya, as well as the reconstruction of the war-torn country. While in Egypt, the Libyan leader is also set to meet with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. Reporting from Cairo, here is Adel Makhroui.
Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli welcomed Libya's interim Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Dbeibah upon his arrival at Cairo airport. Dbeibah is leading a big ministerial and technical delegation for the 11th round of the Joint Higher Committee, a platform established to normalize ties interrupted by Libya's civil war.
The Joint Higher Committee is a fundamental part of the Egyptian-Libyan relations. It established the 10 rights agreements which we as Libyans and Egyptians have been seeking to revive. It includes the freedom of movement, ownership and residency. At one time, Libya hosted 3 million Egyptians and Egypt hosted many Libyans.
Dbeibah's visit comes just one day after Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi held talks with the commander of the Libyan National Army Khalifa Haftar and Speaker of the Eastern-based Parliament Aqila Saleh. Sisi continued the discussions he started with the Eastern-based leaders with the Libyan premier on Thursday. They focused on the means to peacefully evacuate foreign fighters and hold the elections on time.
Libya is facing many complications now. At a time when the country should be moving towards elections, we find people on the ground moving in the opposite direction. Haftar, Aguila and Dbeibah are in Cairo. Presidency Council members are now in Qatar, Italy, and that group is touring African countries. It's clear that not all Libyan leaders are trying to put the elections back on track.
What makes Egypt play an important role in bringing Libyan points of views closer is that Egypt now stands at equal distances from all parties in Libya. It refuses foreign intervention and it cares about Libya's stability because it affects it directly. Libya is the western extension of Egypt's national security. Having Dbeibah in Cairo is important to finalize the last months in the life of that government until elections are held on the 24th of December.
Egypt and Libya have signed several agreements that are expected to enhance bilateral cooperation in several fields. In recent years, Egyptian talks with the Libyans have focused on restoring peace and finding a political way out of this decade-long conflict. Recently, the two nations have been talking about what will happen after the transition ends. Currently, they're working to remove all obstacles preventing Egyptian laborers and companies from crossing border to help in reconstructing Libya. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
And staying in North Africa, where over 2.5 million students and their teachers have reported to over 6,000 schools across Tunisia. This comes after a long break due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Health authorities have put in place measures to curb the spread of the coronavirus as schooling resumes across the North African nation. Here is Adnan Shawashi with more details.
This primary school in downtown Tunis is one of the 6,130 public educational institutions in Tunisia. Hundreds of children are looking forward to meeting their friends following 3 months of holidays. They are talking about going back to school during the COVID-19 pandemic after learning preventive measures.
I know that I must wash my hands, wear a face mask and maintain social distancing.
I'm happy to be back at school. I love my school and classmates.
Some parents have called for the vaccination of their children, while many others are convinced that young people are at very low risk of getting COVID-19.
I'm for the vaccination of my child. I accept it. It's necessary.
I won't let my kid get vaccinated unless there's scientific research and evidence that it is both safe and efficient.
The Education Department wants to ensure a return to normalcy in the school system after the cancellation of the group system, which adversely affected learning. During that time, children could only go to school in small groups for 2 or 3 days per week. Now they have resumed a 5-day study week.
I am vaccinated and ready for this new academic year. Last year, the group system was meant to reduce the number of children in class and to respect social distancing. However, it turned out
the health situation is improving in Tunisia, but we remain vigilant because a new wave of infections could hit the country. All our workers are vaccinated. We urge all parents to get vaccinated to protect themselves and their children.
According to the Health and Education departments, nearly 70% of Tunisian teachers have been vaccinated.
The Tunisian Education Minister declared that the number of pupils enrolled in educational institutions this year has increased by over 65,000 compared to the same period in 2020. Experts advocate for all pupils, teachers and staff to wear masks while indoors in school. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
Kenya's Health Minister Mutahi Kagwe has officially opened 30 renovated state-of-the-art laboratories at the Kenya Medical Research Institute here in Nairobi. Their upgrading was funded through a partnership with the United States. The facility seeks to boost the Medical Research Institute's capacity to deal with emerging diseases, including COVID-19. Here is CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa with that story.
A group of scientists put their heads together, sharing information and knowledge. They are working at the Kenya Medical Research Institute, the government's research arm. And this is one of 30 newly renovated biomedical laboratories that have been commissioned at the Central Laboratory Complex in Nairobi. These particular scientists are involved in stem cell research.
Stem cells, they are cells that are in the body, and they are used to repair systems, our cells, our organs, especially during injuries and in disease conditions. In disease conditions, we are talking about cancers, we're also talking about diabetes, where we may require regeneration of the organs. And also one of the very important applications is on the skin, resulting from burns, or from injuries.
This collaborative project will go a long way towards strengthening the national laboratory capacity in research on emerging and re-emerging diseases across the region. The renovations and upgrades were done through a joint project between the governments of Kenya and the United States of America. The project focuses on biological engagement programs which aim to reduce the threat from naturally occurring diseases or unintentional release of biological pathogens.
The buildings and machines that have been installed here will prevent such a problem, for example, the spread of COVID-19 and the virus ending up harming people. It's very important work. We didn't have this capacity before.
The project was commissioned in the midst of the global fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. The immediate impact of the improved facilities has already been felt during this global pandemic through improved sample collection, processing and storage.
Some of the work that we'll be able to do in our facilities with the equipment that we have acquired is sequencing of the COVID virus to be able to understand more the genomics or the genetic composition of the virus, so that we are able to develop tools that are really relevant and applicable for our particular setting.
The new facilities will also assist those working in the fields of stem cell and regenerative medicine, as well as HIV, AIDS and malaria. As the continent boosts its scientific capacity to tackle diseases, the new laboratories are expected to play an important role in the control and management of emerging infections. Wilkes-Anyabwa, CGTN.
Now, teen pregnancies in South Africa have increased since the start of the COVID-19 lockdown. Gauteng, the most populous province in the country, has recorded a 60% spike since 2019. Most of the 23,000 pregnant teens are minors. CGTN's Julie Shire now reports.
Rolani Motswani is just 19 years old and is already a mother. She fell pregnant when she was 18, soon after finishing high school.
I was very disappointed in myself because I wanted to go to school, leave at rest, but it all changed at once and my dreams disappeared.
It's been an uphill battle since then. With little help from her older partner, Motswani lives off a social grant.
Getting pregnant is not easy. The journey alone is not easy. It's very hard because sometimes you get emotional, you cry because you don't have money to buy your cravings. I had to go around borrowing money. My advice to them is if they shouldn't have sex unprotected, they should prevent.
At least 23,000 other girls in Gauteng province got pregnant during the first 12 months of COVID-19 lockdown, a 60% jump from the previous year, and of great concern is the number of minors impregnated.
It is statutory rape for a 10-year-old to fall pregnant because, firstly, the age of sexual consent in South Africa itself is 16 years plus. And here we're talking about 934 precisely young girls that fell pregnant between the ages of 10 and 14. That's something that needs to be explored. But one cannot rule out the possibilities of rape in these cases.
The COVID-19 pandemic has brought many setbacks for women and young girls who remain marginalized. Rising teen pregnancies is likely to worsen this.
In South Africa, that poverty is quite a reality, especially child poverty. And therefore, these young girls will unfortunately be trapped in that vicious cycle of poverty, and it becomes very difficult for them and challenging to break out of that cycle.
Save the Children South Africa estimates that teen pregnancies have risen in other parts of the country too. The organization is calling for more education around sexual health and reproduction to prevent numbers from climbing further. Julie Shara, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
And further afield, 3 Chinese astronauts have been safely retrieved from the Shenzhou 12 re-entry capsule after it touched down in Dongfeng in northern China's Inner Mongolia region. All 3 taikonauts are said to be in physically good shape after arriving on Earth at 13:34 hours Beijing time. The Shenzhou 12 crew helped build China's first space station, the Tiangong. They also set a new record for China's space program for their length of stay in space. Before the return journey, the astronauts completed various tasks with the support of colleagues on the ground. They sorted and downloaded experiment data and cleared and transferred supplies kept in orbit. Well, the safe return to Earth depended on a key piece of equipment, a giant parachute that softens their landing. All previous Shenzhou spacecraft have been carried back to Earth by Chinese parachutes. One of them is on display in the lobby of the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation. Our reporter Liu Jiaxin went to check it out.
This 9th-floor building gives you a good idea of just how large the parachute is.
It stretches about 70 meters from the top to the end that connects the spacecraft. That's the width of a football field.
The 1,200 square meter parachute is able to slow the craft down to 7 meters per second before landing. But it's not the only chute that's deployed.
The craft still travels at 200 meters per second when it's 10 kilometers above the ground. That's twice of the speed of high-speed trains. It is not practical to open the main chute at that time. Let's say, on rainy days when it's windy, your umbrella can turn over.
Therefore, the craft first opens a smaller chute to slow it down to 90 meters per second before pulling out the main chute. At 1 meter above the ground, the engine at the bottom of the craft can further slow it down to a safe landing speed. The parachutes are designed to save space and weight for a manned spacecraft. The chute package weighs less than 100 kilograms and can be packed into a bag the size of only 2 suitcases.
The rope per meter weighs less than a ping-pong ball, but it's strong enough to hold the weight of 5 me.
A total of 96 ropes must be packed precisely so they don't get tangled for the safety of the taikonauts. The parachute deploys for only a few seconds during landing, but it takes decades for researchers to make those seconds count. 刘嘉欣 CGTN 北京。
Well, it's just about time for all the latest in business. Here's what's coming up. Zimbabwe seeks power supplies from Mozambique to address a biting shortage.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome to the business now. Zimbabwe has asked Mozambique and Zambia to supply it with more electricity as it tries to fill a power shortfall that's led to outages of up to 12 hours a day. It has asked for an additional 180 megawatts from Mozambique and 100 megawatts from Zambia. The current electricity cuts were caused by rehabilitation work at the Kariba South hydropower plant, constraints at its coal-fired Hwange plant, and limited power imports. According to the Zimbabwe Electricity Supply Authority, a total of 1,276 megawatts was being produced by plants in the country, while demand is at 1,700 megawatts. The two neighboring countries currently supply Zimbabwe with as much as 170 megawatts of electricity. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa's announcement on Sunday of South Africa's move to adjusted lockdown level 2 with relaxed curfew hours has sent a glimmer of hope to the struggling hospitality and liquor sectors. Angelo Coppola has the story.
The liquor sector has been decimated by the lockdowns that started in March last year.
Our estimates put it around about 42 billion rand that the industry has lost in sales. It's around about 14.5, 14.7% of the predicted volumes that we'd hope to achieve over the same time. Naturally, a significant loss like that for the industry has a direct impact on government. In terms of GDP, about 60.7 billion rand is our estimate, or 1.2% of South Africa's GDP.
The relaxation of lockdown restrictions has been welcomed, but some are calling for their complete removal.
What we would like to see is going back to normal trading hours as per the pre-pandemic. I think that has to be clear that this situation that we're in, where there's a little bit of a drops of different things and different loosening of restriction is not ideal.
The latest relaxation of lockdown restrictions will have a limited impact on the liquor industry. Alcohol sales will now be permitted on Fridays.
The retailers estimate that they lost about 50% of their normal sales because they lost those 3 key days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So yeah, the relaxation does help us, but we've had an industry that, quoting those numbers earlier, that has been decimated.
The tourism sector is in crisis. The longer operating hours is good news for some, but there are areas that the local sector can't control.
It's issues of the red listing of South Africa in the UK, the adverse travel advisories that are coming from many European countries, US and everywhere else. But what we've seen in the past few weeks is that the likes of Canada are now opening up South Africa, the likes of Germany, the Netherlands is looking into it. And we hope that more and more countries come into the fore and open up for their citizens to travel to South Africa without the quarantine requirements when they go back home.
There's no question that the lockdowns have had a severe impact on the hospitality sector and the tourism industry, and it's quite likely that it's not going to recover anytime soon. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Egyptian authorities have announced that the government has received offers from 4 international investors to repurpose the Mogama Tahrir building by the third quarter of 2021. The Mogama is a huge complex in downtown Cairo that has historic value. Built in the 1940s, it was the headquarters of all state-related services for citizens. Yasser Hakim takes a closer look at the history and future of this Cairo landmark.
Many people only know Mogama al-Tahrir or Tahrir complex as the building standing high at the epicenter of demonstrations during the uprisings in 2011 and 2013, overlooking the renowned Tahrir Square. But there's another story behind it. Tahrir complex was built in 1948 to offer all government services such as issuing identification cards, passports, licenses, and more to the citizens.
The aim was to adopt a one-stop shop system back then, before this concept was even created worldwide. It meant to gather most government services in one place to help citizens finish their paperwork easily.
But with the population increase over the decades, it became a load on the state and citizens.
Tahrir complex reached the extent that 30,000 people congregate to it every day from around the country to finish their paperwork, with 10,000 employees serving them inside. This created a huge burden on the city center, with heavy traffic congestion during the week because of the employees and the people going there.
The building became the epitome of bureaucracy and centralization. But a new era led by Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi reverted to a policy of decentralization and digital transformation. The complex became absolute and was emptied in 2018. It was then refurbished into a wonderful-looking site that was showcased during the Royal Mummies Parade earlier in the year. This raised the question on what to do with the huge empty building in a strategic location in Cairo's city center that overlooks the famous Tahrir Square and the historic Cairo Museum.
The Tahrir complex is 14 floors. There are ideas to use the top 2 floors as hotel apartments or hotels. The first and second floors will be bazaars and other tourist shops because it's located in front of the Tahrir Square and the obelisk. The remaining 10 floors in Tahrir complex might contain coffee shops and restaurants, parking space and some administrative offices for rent.
4 unnamed consortia have submitted offers to develop and run the complex in partnership with Egypt's sovereign fund that owns the building. A decision is expected before end of the year. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, both diversity and inclusion have become buzzwords in the fashion industry over the last decade. A number of clothing retailers and manufacturers have been expanding their lines, featuring a much broader range of sizes, skin tones, and genders. One such brand is Rafea, an Egyptian clothing line that's tailoring clothes for women of all shapes and sizes. With that story, here's Najma Abdirizak.
Fashion isn't just about pretty clothing and what shoes to pair with them. It's all about representation and inclusivity, 2 things Nora Galal's brand is known for.
We try to work on different campaigns with different ideas. For example, we are trying to fight the idea that chubby girls should wear black and not white so that they look thinner, or that dark-skinned girls shouldn't wear colors for whatever reason. We try to work on these ideas but without making ourselves susceptible to social media bullying. So we try to work on this until there is enough awareness that this is normal.
Rafah launched in 2015 and has since been offering Egyptian women of all sizes high-quality modern essentials for their wardrobe. The clothing brand is cropping up on the horizon as one-size fashion brands continue to leave nearly 70% of female consumers out of the conversation.
Our goal is that Rafah helps the Egyptian woman feel beautiful without feeling that she needs to change herself and without having to conform to a stereotypical image that the fashion industry usually sets as a goal for women. We want women to feel beautiful without facing any obstacles.
Rafah not only tailors clothes to each woman's body but also lets clients choose the colors, cuts and fabrics they want to represent themselves in. The hope is to change public attitudes about women's body sizes, normalizing the right to dress without conforming to global fashion standards.
The thing I like most about Rafah is that I customize what I want to fit my sizes. I don't find anything transparent and the quality cut is always perfect. I used to struggle a lot when I went to shops as I would find clothes with poor material or material that is transparent, and as a veiled woman I really struggled with those things. Things wouldn't suit me easily or they wouldn't be my size. With Rafah I could give them my sizes and they would customize it exactly right.
Brands like Rafah have been on the rise across the globe over the last decade. Big global fashion brands from Gucci to Zara have been expanding their lines, which once stopped at a size 12 to include sizes up to a 28. Women like Noura are behind the change as they continue to advocate for more inclusivity in the fashion industry. Najma Abdirizak, CGTN.
Now, if there's anyone that doesn't need reminding that banknotes are just worthless pieces of paper, it is Zimbabweans. Over a decade ago, they watched as hyperinflation obliterated their currency and led to the printing of a 100 trillion Zimbabwean dollar note. Most bills ended up in the trash, but Zimbabwean visual artist Prudence Chimutua has found value in the unloved old banknotes by using them to make art.
Zim dollars were abandoned in 2009 after inflation caused by rampant money printing under the late Robert Mugabe erased everyone's savings and pushed millions into poverty. Most bills ended up in the trash, but Zimbabwean visual artist Prudence Chimutua has found value in the discarded old banknotes by using them to make art.
Their reaction most of the time is most people get angry, because a lot of people lost a lot of things, and some other people even lost lots of money because you could just wake up and boom, the $1 million you had in your account is no longer functional. So for me, I'm trying to bring that element whereby I'm like sort of celebrating for people to see the beauty of these old banknotes. So when someone looks at this artwork, they go like, wow. And then they forget that the pain this thing has caused them.
Zimbabwe's inflation is considered by the International Monetary Fund as the worst of any peacetime country. Chimutua hopes that through her work, people may see something beautiful in the bills and in the process, perhaps recover from the trauma of that time. Her paintings capture the daily lives of women, shown dancing, cooking, or in bright and elegant dress. She sticks the old Zim dollar notes on the canvas with glue to form part of the image.
I paint them blue because for me it's a resemblance of strength and dominance. You can't miss a blue person. You would want to go near and try and find out what this is all about.
Some of her latest works depict today's norm. In one, a woman wears a mask and blouse made from purple 500 million Zimbabwean dollar notes. The National Gallery of Zimbabwe, featuring various artists, including Mutua, is running a month-long exhibition in Harare in a bid to raise awareness surrounding COVID-19.
During this era, it's amazing to know and to see that people are still thinking outside their box and they still have positive vibes about this whole thing. So that is what has really caught my eye, and it's amazing.
The exhibition targets the 18 to 41-year age group and depicts how masked every part of life has become. The new normal, masks, vaccination, social distancing, locked in scenes in a serious, realistic, comical, and even spiritual perspective were all part of the exhibition. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And it's time for the sport. We begin with football, where Carlos Queiroz has officially been unveiled as the new coach of Egypt's national team, as teams around Africa continue making changes to their technical benches ahead of next month's World Cup qualifiers. The seasoned tactician begins his work next week and has been tasked with qualifying the Pharaohs to the Qatar 2022 finals. CGTN's Adel Mahroui brings us more.
The Portuguese veteran coach has now officially taken over as the new boss of Egypt's celebrated men's football team. Carlos Queiroz landed in Cairo with a big CV loaded with 32 years of experience. He has worked as a head coach or assistant at European football giants Manchester United and Real Madrid, besides leading a number of national sides. He's by far the most experienced coach to lead the Pharaohs. The Egyptian Football Association said they hired his services to mark 100 years since its foundation.
This is a new phase for Egyptian football. We are hoping to have a better, a stronger national team. As high as the expectations are in the coming period, it is natural to present a coach who is suitable to meet all these aspirations.
This is time not really to talk too much. This is time to deliver. This is time for me to make questions and learn as much as possible to make the right decisions for the team. Every single player must understand when they dress the national team shirt, it's more than a shirt. It is the dream of 105 million people that they have on top of the shoulders. I can guarantee and promise that I will dedicate my life and my commitment to them.
Queiroz comes in with his own coaching staff, who will be assisted by a team of established locals. They are all former Pharaohs and some of the biggest stars in the country's football. The world's oldest player in a FIFA World Cup and legendary goalkeeper Issam al-Hadari, as well as veteran defender Wael Goma, are among the Egyptians in the coaching team.
Dia El Sayed and Mohamed Shauki were both colleagues to some of the national team players. They now are coaching. That creates good chemistry in the team, especially that their next two matches against Libya are decisive. I don't think Carlos Queiroz will be able to have an influence over the team. The assistant coaches will be taking a bigger role until he gets acquainted with the players.
The 68-year-old coach's first mission is to push Egypt to win Group F of the CAF second round World Cup qualifiers. Queiroz has successfully taken his national teams to the World Cup finals on 4 previous occasions. Egypt is up against a few competitive tests in the next months. In October and November, the World Cup qualifications continue. In December, the Pharaohs will be playing in the Arab Cup, and in January in the 2021 AFCON in Cameroon, which will extend to February. Finally, by March, the final round for the Qatar 2022 World Cup qualifications begin. That's why the nation is bringing its first Tier A coach in history. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
In Kenya, the country's football federation is on the hunt for a new national team coach after Jacob Ghost Mulee left the position by mutual consent on Tuesday. Turkish national and former Moldova coach Engin Firat is among those linked with the vacant position. Mulee left Kenya second in Group E of the CAF second round qualifying after drawing with Uganda at home and Rwanda away in their opening FIFA 2022 World Cup qualifiers earlier this month. In a statement, the Football Kenya Federation said assistant coaches Ken Odhiambo and William Muluya will be in charge of preparations for the double-header against group leaders Mali next month as the search for a new coach continues. Well, it seems to be all about African coaches today. The Zimbabwe Football Association has appointed Norman Mapeza as the interim national team coach after parting ways with Croatian Zdravko Logarusic on Sunday. Stakeholders have called for a local coach to be installed to the post permanently. CGTN's Mahia Mutua reports from Harare.
A dismal record of just one win in 14 precipitated the end of Croatian Zdravko Logarusic's tenure. His wasn't the only misadventure Zimbabwe has had with a foreign gaffer.
We don't have the budget for a good foreign coach with a lot of experience who have performed very well. So as a result, we find the foreign coaches we have employed have left us with an egg on the face. They've performed badly. I think we remember Valinos, he was more of a circus, St. Fate, more of a circus. Now we had another circus in the name of Loga.
There are calls for a local to get the Warriors job full-time.
The value in a foreign coach is non-existent in terms of the lay of the land, the way that they don't know the structure, they don't know the players, they don't know what goes on here. You're paying a huge amount of money to these foreign coaches, and and when you get a local coach, you don't want to give him the same kind of support. You don't want to give him the work environment that's conducive like the foreign coach. You don't want to pay him as much money, the same amount of money as the foreign coach. So it becomes a big problem.
However, some say nationality shouldn't matter.
What our considerations need to be to find the right coach. Now, who's the right coach? We need to then have an idea of what our footballing philosophy is. And that's based on various metrics, including the prototype of our players. You look at our players, they're very small in stature, very technically gifted. Some of them have a lot of speed. So you need somebody who's going to be able to extract the best attributes out of those players.
Multiple domestic title-winning coach Norman Mapeza has been handed the reins for 3 months, during which expectations are clear.
Let's take our next international qualifier against Ghana and make sure that we get a positive result out of that. Come back home, make sure that when we play our home matches, we get a full set of points.
Zimbabwe currently anchors Group G of the 2022 World Cup qualifiers, a position many here blame on the former coach. Now that he's gone, the hope is that the Warriors can rekindle their dreams of a first ever appearance. Mahia Mutua, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
And further afield, Nigerian Victor Osimhen scored a second-half brace to help Italian side Serie A club Napoli fight back